In this video, I'm going to be going over the top 20 best boss fighting creatures in ARK. I'm going to be going over ARK Survival Evolved and Ascended as well, just going to be including them both. And a lot of the videos I've seen online, at least videos and stuff online, I've usually just ranked them like the island creatures, so they'll just go over the island bosses. But in this video, I'm going to be including every single boss and every creature in the game. So basically how I'm going to be ranking them is how effective each creature is for fighting a boss and like how many bosses they are good at fighting. So the more bosses a creature is good at fighting, the higher it's probably going to be, and of course how effective it is against the boss as well. Also want to mention that this list is come more from a solo perspective, because that's how I usually do the boss fights. But anyway, let's get into it. Number 20 is the Wyvern. Now I know what you're thinking is I finally put the Wyvern not at number 1, because I usually put it number 1 for everything, because I'm a little bit biased. It is my favorite creature, but for boss fighting, of course, it's not the best. Top 20, I mean, it kind of barely made it in here. The only reason I do have it in here is it's good for about 2 different boss fights. First off is the Desert Titan. It's really good against if you have like an army of them, or even not that many. If you just have a few people with lightning wyverns, you can easily take this thing out. And of course, it's better if someone's piloting it, because then they can use the breath more effectively. But as you can see, I shred through it with this thing. You can also use wyverns in the manticore fight, but I wouldn't recommend it. But it is possible, so that does give it points. Overall, those are like the 2 options you can use wyverns for, which is why it's at the lowest spot on the list. And of course, there are other options for fighting the Desert Titans, so that's why the Wyvern isn't exactly the best boss fighting creature in the games. You could still use other ones, but I think the Wyvern is like one of the best for it. Number 19 is the Megalosaurus. Now this one is good for one specific boss fight, and it's the Rockwell one, but honestly I think it's probably the best option for the Rockwell fight in my opinion, mainly because of their size. And of course, Megalosaurus, if you don't know, they're only active at night, but they are really powerful at night. And in Rockwell, or on Aberration, you can use them all the time. It doesn't have to be nighttime or anything, which makes them good for this map because you can always use them. You mainly just use them to attack its heart when it's opened up. Most of you guys know how the Rockwell boss fight works, but it kind of just opens up and then you have to shoot the tentacles afterwards. It's good for fighting in between those, and it can also kill Reapers and stuff too. So overall, they're pretty good for that. And that's about the only option, because of course on every other map they sleep during the day, and they're honestly not the best choice for those, but it is good for the Rockwell fight, so that's why it's here. It's usually my number 1 choice for Rockwell. And next up at number 18 is the Woolly Rhino. Now I know some people are probably going to be upset that I have it this low, but I do have my reasons. And like I said earlier, I am mainly a solo player. So in solo, the Woolly Rhino is pretty much useless in boss fights. It's only good if you have a full tribe and everyone's mounting it. And the reason for that is because the Woolly Rhino has the charge ability, and the charge actually does a ton of damage, especially to bosses. So it's good for that, but it only does the charge if someone's riding it or is mounted. So you have to have a tribe full of people mounting it. But if you do, it's really great, especially for the dragon fight. It makes that boss fight a lot easier, and I know it's a great strat for that, but since I am a solo player, they're not really the best for me. But I am going to give it a little bit of credit, which is why I'm putting it on the list here. Number 17 is the Mosasaur. This one is good for one singular boss fight, and that's Modair, because it's the only underwater boss. But for Modair, they're pretty great. In this video clip here, I only had about like 10 of them, and only like 7 of them were actually attacking it. And that still got me through the entire boss fight without a single one of them dying. It just took a little longer because I didn't have a full army. But the point is, you don't even need a full army to take on Alpha Modair. And they're pretty decent. They got tons of health, a lot of damage, so they're pretty good for the motor fight. But of course, the reason they're so low is because they only are good for the motor fight, and it's impossible to bring them to any other boss fight. So of course, that's going to dock it points. And after that, number 16 is the Tuso. Same reasons for pretty much everything what I just said about the Mosasaur, except this one's just a bit better. It does more damage and has more health, so overall the Tuso is just a better option if you can have more of those. So Tuso is better, but Mosa is still pretty good. Like I said, I'd rather bring Tusos into the motor fight than I would the Mosasaurus. Next up at number 15 is the Gigantoraptor. Now this one's not good at actually fighting the boss, it's more of a support dino in the boss. And how this thing works is if you imprint on baby dinos with it, you can use this thing to imprint on baby dinos. It'll basically give you a bonding buff, which is going to give you like increased stats overall on the creatures. So if you have that, like you say, your entire armor you imprinted with the Gigaraptor, then you can bring it into a fight. and you'll have that bonding buff. Of course, the Gigaraptor has to be near the creature for it to have that bonding buff, so that's why you'd want to bring this thing into a boss fight, but that's pretty much what you use it for. I haven't really used that much, and I haven't seen a ton of people using it, but of course, it is pretty solid if you just want to get some extra stat bonuses on there. But after that is the Spinosaurus. It kind of sucks that the Spinosaurus isn't that good. It's basically a T-Rex with less health and less melee damage, and in ARK Ascended, I think it's a little bit nerfed as well. I'm not sure why they decided to nerf it, because it was already worse than the T-Rex. It makes no sense, but you know, whatever. This thing's only really good because of the water buff it has. When it touches water, it gets increased damage and speed, and it might be a few other stats, but I know it does increase the damage, which is useful for boss fights. But basically means the Spino is only really good in arenas with water. Mainly the center arena on ARK Ascended, it's good for, because those bosses are already super easy, but the water buff helps. And then the Volguera bosses, it's good on that map. The Broodmother also has water in the arena, even though I wouldn't recommend it for that fight, because you're probably just going to get slapped if you go in there. But if you have really good Spinos, I guess you could use them for the Broodmother too. Overall, it's just a couple bosses that have water in the arena that it's good for. And if there's no water in the arena, don't bring the Spinos at all, because you're probably going to get wrecked. Next up, at number 13, is the Megatherium. This one is really strong, but it's only good at one boss fight, and that is the Broodmother boss fight. Basically how it works is the Megatherium gets an insect killer buff whenever it kills a bug, and that gives it like super increased stats. I believe it has like a 200% damage increase, and it has like 200% resistance. I might be wrong on the resistance part. Somebody can correct me in the comments if I'm wrong, but it gets a ton of resistance and a ton of damage buff when it does, and of course killing the spiders in there, it gets that buff, making it great for killing the Broodmother. And the Broodmother, like the alpha one on the island and stuff, that boss fight is quite difficult. The Broodmother hits really hard, so having a boss that is just great at taking out the Broodmother is really good, like the Megatherium. But of course that's the only boss it works for. But once again, I think the Megatherium is probably the best for the Broodmother, except for one other creature, which we'll get to later. That's kind of just broken right now, but the Megatheriums are definitely like the best choice for the Broodmother. And of course, you fight the Broodmother on multiple different maps too, so I believe that also kind of elevates it a little bit, because you can use the Megatherium in multiple different boss fights that have the Broodmother. And number 12 is the Daedon. This one, of course, isn't a boss fighting creature. It's more of a support in the boss fight. All it does is it heals things around you. Now, it's not really that great if you're not riding it, so it's best if you have another player riding it, which of course isn't the best for solo play, even though you can use it in solo. Just have it on auto heal is not as good. And but you know, it's nice. It gives some healing to creatures while they're in a fight. It's not like a ton of healing towards like super game changing or anything, but it does definitely help out if you're in certain boss fights and stuff. And I definitely wouldn't say it's needed for most of the boss fights anyway. You can get away with not using a Daedon, but it is kind of nice to have. Next up is number 11 is the Rock Drake. Now once again, this one's only good for like one specific boss fight, but that boss fight is one of the major ones, and of course it is the Rockwell fight. I think you pretty much need this unless you're doing that one strat with the cactus broth, and most people that do that strat are probably not going to like this pick, but I do like doing the Rockwell fight just without the cactus broth method. Also, if you're just playing on Aberration, you don't really have access to the cactus broth, but at the same time that kind of ignores a lot of the, I don't even know, I'm just rambling on. Basically, I think the Rock Drake's pretty much essential unless you're doing that strat for this boss fight, and it's pretty great because you can go around, you can use the shotgun on your back, you can use weapons, of course, to take out the tentacles. It's great for going around taking out tentacles and all that stuff, and everyone who's in the boss fight should definitely be riding a Rock Drake. It's just pretty great overall for the Rockwell fight. Also wanted to mention that I am partnered with Nitrado, so if you do want to get an ARK Survival Ascended server, you can use the link in my description and go check those out, or if you do want to get yourself an ARK server. But anyway, back to the video, and at number 10 is the Giga. Now you can't bring this one into most boss fights, but you can use it on world bosses, which pretty much just means Extinction. But on Extinction, it is really great. You can take out pretty much all of the Titans, at least the Forest and the Ice Titan, and you can use it during the King Titan fight if you want to. I mean, you can get some extra damage on it too, so that's a bonus. It does a lot of damage, of course. That's pretty much all you need it for. It just does a crap ton of damage and makes super quick work of the Titans. And you can also use it on the Fjordur, like Haiti and Skull bosses. That's very specific, but if you want to use it on those bosses, that one's also a world boss, so you can use it on that too, just a little bonus. And that one's going to absolutely destroy that boss as well, but it's great for the Titans and great for that Fjordur boss fight. And number 9 is the Dreadnoughtus. Of course, this one just came out, and this one's absolutely insane. So, of course, once again, you can't bring it into normal boss fights, but you can use it against the Titans, and it shreds the Titans. All I needed was one Dreadnoughtus, and I was able to kill the Ice Titan, which is like the strongest Titan, excluding the King Titan, of course. It gets a Titan killer buff when it's in the radius, so it gets 50% extra damage and 50% extra resistance. And with a maxed out Dreadnoughtus with like 100% imprinting and max level, I had 16,000 damage per hit on the Ice Titan, which is just absolutely ridiculous. And of course, this thing has a ton of health too. When I had this thing maxed out, I had 200k health, which is this thing's an absolute tank. It does so much damage. It can solo Titans, which is pretty great. And of course, the reason I have it above the Giga, obviously, you only need one of these, so you don't have to go making an entire army. Only thing is, you can use this against the King Titan. I tried using an army of just Dreadnoughtus, but they don't really attack it by themselves. Someone has to be riding it, but if you have someone riding the Dreadnoughtus, it's also good for the King Titan fight. Or if you just need something to tank during the King Titan fight, the Dreadnoughtus can also tank a lot of the blows from the King Titan because they just have so much health. But after that, at number 8 is the Karchar. Now, this one's pretty much like the Giga, except it does less damage. So you might be wondering why I have it above the Dreadnoughtus and the Giga. But the reason I have it here is because it can go in the Tech Cave and the Overseer fight, which of course you can't bring it into the Overseer fight, but it is the best thing for clearing out the Tech Cave, which I am going to give it the points for, and it's why it's so high. It's pretty much essential now. If you're going into the Tech Cave, I would 100% recommend bringing a Karchar, as it's just going to make clearing out the Tech Cave a breeze. It's going to make it so much easier. Instead of having to use just the normal smaller creature, you can use the Karchar and just wipe everything out with it. And of course, it does everything a Giga can too. You can use it during the Titan fights. You can use it during the King Titan fight if you want. Of course, it's not going to be as effective as a Giga in those fights, but it's still going to be really effective. Like, you're still going to be killing things with it. It's just not as good as the Giga on that front. Next up at number 7 is the Titans. Now, these are great for one specific boss, but they can also be used on a few others. Like the other Titans, you can basically just fight Titan on Titan, but of course it is mainly used for the King Titan. And why I have it so high, even though it's basically only good for one boss, is it's like the only option for the King Titan, and the King Titan is one of the main bosses in the game. So it's not like a side boss or something. I don't even know. Like, it's like one of the most important boss fights basically, and this is like the only way to do it. I mean, you can use other methods too, like an army of Gigas, but you're probably just gonna get stomped. You basically need the Titans to fight the King Titan. And it's the best way. Even if you do find another method, it's not going to be better than using just the Titans and slamming it, because they do so much damage to the King Titan on the Gamma and Beta difficulties. And of course, the Alpha King Titan, you can just use the Mega Mech. But for those, it's great. And also, I'm including both Titans, the Forest and Ice, and then I guess Desert too, even though the Desert one is not the greatest. But I'm just including both. They're both great, even though I think the Ice Titan is better. And then the Forest Titan, and then last would be the Desert Titan. Number 6 is the Shadow Mane. These things are pretty phenomenal. I mean, they're really strong. They don't need saddles, but they do have natural armor on them, so you don't even really have to go out and find blueprints for an Ascendant saddle and stuff. They already have natural armor on them, which of course makes them even stronger. And they're just really strong overall. I don't really know much to say. I used them on the Alpha Dragon fight, and it works. Now, they're probably not the best option for that fight, but you can use it on there. They're great for the Master Controller fight. Of course, they're not natives to that map, but if you can bring them to the Master Controller fight, would 100% recommend bringing those. And they're also the main thing for the Genesis Part 2 Rockwell fight as well. So both of those boss fights, you wouldn't really want to use anything else. I mean, you could probably use Rexes on both of those, but I think Shadow Manes would end up just being better overall on both of those fights. So those are two main boss fights where I think Shadow Manes are the best, and you can still use it on pretty much almost every boss and still get away with doing really well. But after that, number 5 is the Deinonychus. These things are pretty great, and it's for one simple reason, is they're only creature in the game that can deal bleed damage to bosses, which of course, if you don't know what bleed damage is somehow, it basically just deals damage over time when they hit, so it's going to deal like 5% of the boss's health. But 5% of a boss's health is a crap ton. That's like 50,000. If a boss has like 1,000,000 health, 5% damage is like 50,000 health from one singular bite. So these little raptor looking things doing that much damage is crazy. So they can lock on to, like, say the dragon. They're honestly one of the best for the dragon, especially on Ark Survival Evolved, because they can deal bleed damage and take it out super quickly. The Deinonychus are absolutely amazing. But next up, at number 4 is the Rex. Now, I know some people don't like using the Rex because it is overused, but it's overused for a reason, because it is just like the best default option for a boss fight. There's not many bosses where I would say the Rex is going to be a bad option, except for maybe the Alpha Dragon fight. I wouldn't recommend Rexes for that, but pretty much everything else, if you have strong enough Rexes and you breed them enough, you can use them for tons of different fights. I've even used them for the Titans before, and they work too on that. Like, pretty much every boss in the game, except for the underwater boss, and I'd say the Overseer and the Alpha Dragon, you can use the Rexes on pretty much anything else, and they'll be great. You also have the Tech Rexes, which give higher levels. You can find 180 Tech Rexes and get extra levels off that. And there's also the X Rexes, which have like 50% resistance damage. So you can choose between those different Rexes, which are obviously going to be better overall and improve, which, of course, it's nice having those other variants that you can use. Next up at number 3 is the Deinosuchus, of course, the modded Arcaditions creature that's been added to Vanilla. And I don't even think they nerfed it when they brought it into Vanilla. They just brought it in, and it's like completely overpowered. As you can see, 51,000 damage is ridiculous. Of course, I'm in single player, so the damage is going to be a little bit higher than it would be on official, but still ridiculous. All of the footage, by the way, has all been on single player, so they're not going to be as effective on a server as, you know, it would be normally, but that's besides the point. I'm not even gonna have a cut in this boss fight, and you could see it's been like 20 seconds and they've already like destroyed the dragon fight. They have that gigabyte where it basically charges up over time and then it chomps. As you can see, that bite is doing like 29,000 damage. Now I was like, I don't think it's gonna do that much on a official server, but that's just insane. You can pretty much maul any boss to death in seconds. Like, pretty much anything that you could use the Rex for, you could use the Deinosuchus for, and it's gonna kill it 20 times faster, because that gigabyte is like 100 billion damage. It's actually ridiculous. It does so much. I didn't even really know about it until recently. I got a ton of comments asking about it, and I tested it out, and of course it was on that dragon fight, and it just mauls it to death. I don't really know what much to say. It's overpowered. But at number 2 is the therizinosaurus. This one has been a phenomenal one for years, and it's been pretty solid throughout, and there's a lot of reasons why it's even higher than Deinosuchus, even though the Deinosuchus I would say is a little bit more overpowered than the the therizinosaurus is, but the therizinosaurus has just been solid all around. Basically, it is a herbivore, so that means you can use sweet veggie cakes, and sweet veggie cakes do a ton of healing, which of course carnivores don't have, which is nice. So you can get the extra healing buff with the sweet veggie cakes, and it works for almost every boss too. Pretty much anything you can use the Rexes in, I think you can use therizinosaurs in, and they're just going to be just as effective. Of course, they don't really have as much health. They have a little bit less damage, but of course they do have that extra healing you get from that. They're great for the dragon fight. Of course, if the Deinosuchus didn't exist, I would say that the therizinosaur is the best for the alpha dragon fight, but I think they're also the best for the alpha overseer fight as well, mainly because you can get through the tech cave so easily. That's another buff of them, or some reason they're great, is because they're so small. They can actually fit super well. Can go move around super easy. Like Rexes, they have a horrible turning radius and stuff, but the therizinosaurus, it can just easily move around, which means you can easily get it through the tech cave, easily get it around the arenas you're fighting in, which makes it great as well. Overall, it's definitely got to be one of the most solid boss fighting creatures in the game. But at number 1 is going to be the Utyrannus. This one is easily the best boss fighting creature in the game, and it's not even a actual fighting creature. It's more of a support. Basically, its Courage Roar gives creatures a 20% damage buff and a 20% damage resistance, so they're going to be taking less damage and they're going to be dealing more damage. This is basically essential for every boss fight that you go into. Of course, as you've seen in the footage, I've been using it in every single boss fight because you pretty much need it. The only ones you can't use it in are like the Titans, and I mean, you could bring it into a Titan fight, I guess, but the King Titan fight and the Motor fight, because that one's underwater. But you know, you can bring this one into almost every boss fight, and it's going to be amazing. And honestly, you'd be stupid not to bring it into most boss fights, as that percentage buff you get on the creatures, it helps tremendously with boss fights and can be the reason for winning, because some of the boss fights can get really close in this game. So having that extra buff helps a ton. But anyway, that's going to be it for this video. If you guys did enjoy it, make sure to leave a like and also subscribe. Thanks for watching, and bye.